you hear that, the transfer case is constantly trying to shift, so it's junk. We spent a couple nights working on this thing, getting it ready to go, and all I gotta do now is lift the thing out, and once the engine kind of gets away from the firewall, I'm gonna unbolt the fuel lines that go to the gas tank. They're already cut on the engine itself, so then that'll be the last thing holding in the drivetrain in place, because we're taking out the engine, training, and transfer case. Someone wants transfer case, and it's about impossible to get the bell housing bolts off the engine while it's inside the vehicle, so we're gonna give her a shot. Alright, now it's time to pull the engine out of this and put it in this. Nah. Look how long this thing is. This thing's longer than the old Willys back there. There's no way you could ever run this style of training transfer case in a Willys. I mean, this thing would just touch axle to axle. So all we gotta do now is knock that off, block off all the open ports on this thing, and then let it sit until we decide what we're gonna do. There she is. The only hard part about this was making sure to get this whole system off the fuel tank off with the training, that way it didn't get drug out. Cross members were decently easy, so that's good. There's our 6-liter iron block aluminum heads. I believe we're gonna say our final goodbyes to the 2003 GMC Yukon Denali XL 1500. So the way I found this Tahoe is we're out at Moab, and I smoked the clutch in the Submarine, and I was like, you know what, if I'm gonna do rock crawling going out west, I need something with a little bit more power, some better gearing, etc. My buddy just so happened to text me, his grandfather passed away, had this Yukon, had transfer case problems. It kept shifting, or no, it would not shift out of low range. So it was a pretty decent Tahoe, I mean, minus some rust down here. So while we're in Moab, I made the call to buy this thing, and I was pretty mad about my smoked clutch. So now that the Submarine is running, driving, stopping, am I gonna swap that engine into here? I don't know. The problem is you gotta redo everything. The whole transmission tunnel, the pedal situation, the master cylinder is going to the firewall, which means you need hanging pedals. Redo the tranny tunnel, the motor mounts, the transmission mounts. You gotta do all the brake lines. The axles are gonna end up snapping, so you need like a Dana 30 here, and a Dana 44 back there. You know, there's just some things I like to do different if I rebuilt the Submarine. I made the roll cage stick a little way from the body right here. That way I could have this section in case I want to put an original windshield that would still fit behind it. I think what I would do in the future is shove this forward and just have flat bars across, because it's a little close to the steering wheel, not bad. But the problem is I'd like some more stomach room and to shove the steering wheel up further. But the problem is you can't do that because it hits a roll cage. And even if I did loosen the bolts and shove this back over here, the problem is the fulcrum is up here, so I did use a 2A tub, which gave me a little less stomach room, and I wish I would have at least cut this outside my seat backwards. I wouldn't have had those problems. So just a bunch of little things. It's so much work to redo this thing. It's already running, driving, stopping, and it would no longer be the Submarine with that engine swap. So what am I going to do with that engine? I don't know. It makes sense to build another Jeep. Problem is to build the Jeep that I want. Just to build this chassis alone with all new parts, because I'd buy a new body, have a new frame built, etc. Without axles, I figured it was like $12,000. You start adding in tires, wheels, gas tank holder, taillights, handles, steering wheel, steering column, etc. So all that stuff really adds up, so I don't know, but here's the Tahoe. Or Yukon, I should say. This thing's deluxe. The doors got sold. That got sold. The speedometer. I still do have this. I took the exhaust off to get the entire drivetrain out, so I still got miscellaneous stuff. Got the 2 doors back here. That got sold. Someone told me they're gonna buy the bumper, so I ripped it off. They ended up not coming. What I found out is someone says they're gonna get something. You offer to take it off for them. Then they never show up. They never pay you. So I turned into, you had to come pull it and pay for it before you pulled it, or else they just bail on you. Or like the guy I sold the door to, you know, I showed up to meet him at a gas station, and then he said the agreed upon price was half of what I actually said, and he deleted the messages so that way I couldn't go back and show it to him. So unfortunately, the crowd when parting this out is not the same crowd as a Willys crowd. These guys not as trustworthy, so that was a bit of a disappointment. Inside, we got most of the parts from when I did the engine part out. We got the radiator support, etc. There's a rear bumper that I pulled that I didn't get paid for. So that was fun. I didn't have to battle some wasps when I did that. Gave away the taillights to a local friend. Tires and wheels are okay. When I was pulling the engine, I did try to save the harness for everything. So I was really diligent about pulling everything apart and not breaking anything. Problem is, when I went to pull out the ECU to the vehicle, I found out it was all wired into the dash like this, and there's no way to disconnect it in any possible way. So I ended up just saying screw it, and that's when I started cutting things out of this. For 700 bucks you get a standalone harness. It's not worth trying to pull wires out of these and figure out what can still make your vehicle run. And look how many pink wires are just right there. There's multiple. I mean, how are you ever gonna track that down? 700 bucks you get a positive, a ground, and a keyed power wire. That's all you need. 700 bucks, you can't beat it. Some guy did buy this as a patch panel, and once he figured out it was gonna cost like, you know, 1,500, 2,000 bucks to have someone weld that in and repaint it, I think he kind of bailed on that project. I was saying for like 1,300 bucks, paid 1,000 for the Yukon with that transfer case problem. I got $200 in a pair of ramps that I ruined trying to get on the trailer, and 100 bucks in gas. So I'm at 680 right now, and I figured I'm gonna sell the tranny for 100 bucks. So I need to get like 500 bucks out of the rest of this. So I'm gonna put up for sale 500 bucks as is. I figured the doors are worth at least 100 bucks. The rear hatch is 100 bucks. Tires and wheels are 200 bucks. I mean, it starts to add up pretty quick, so I just like to sell it all at once. I'm kind of tired of dealing with the people coming to buy parts off of it, so we'll see what happens. But overall, it was a kind of a fun, entertaining project. I've never yanked the engine out of a newer vehicle before, and I gotta say, this thing was the easiest vehicle to work on. At times, this was easier to work on than that was. Everything on these is pretty much quick connect, disconnect, like a plug-and-play system. Everything, you know, has weld nuts on the frame, so you only need one impact gun to yank bolts out, whereas that you might have to wrench on this side or ratchet on the other. So that was pretty cool about it. I mean, I had the entire front half of the body off, and you know, the grill and the hood and everything, 10 minutes. So it was pretty sweet. Just to put the engine from the Yukon into the Submarine, leaving the same chassis, cost $6,000. Because you got, now this is with a free engine. You got a $700 harness, you got $800 in converting the steering column to work with the power steering kit, which that kit I believe is somewhere around $500 or $600 as well. And then you also have to change the tie rod ends to work with power steering. So you got all that system. Then you gotta buy headers that squeeze against a block to fit between the tight frame rails. You got a new exhaust system. You gotta get the ECU flash so that way it works without the, cause if you pull the ECU out of this off the dash, it thinks that it's stolen, so you gotta get that flashed out. You gotta change this engine to a Corvette intake manifold, oil pan, an accessory drive to make it smaller this way and this way to fit inside the cowl of the Jeep. The transmission with the transfer case adapter, all rebuilt of course, it's $1,000. The transfer case with the extra low gearing like the Dane 18, that's $1,000. Then you got drive shafts. So the problem is it's $6,000 to do the engine swap, and the Jeep works right now and it's free, per se. I mean, it's not super low gearing. However, for out here, just playing out in the woods and the hills, it's not super low geared, but it's perfect for what it is, especially mud bogging. Not bad at all. Now that the engine's all by itself, it's really easy to see why it's so expensive to do the swap. For starters, to get it to fit inside of a little Jeep, you gotta get the Corvette style intake manifold out of a car, and it's like half the height. The truck manifold is taller, puts more air through the engine, however, it's taller. So next thing you gotta do about height is you gotta worry about the oil pan. This thing's super deep because it's truck style, so you have to get, again, a Corvette style to make it shorter. Then, the engine is too long, so what you gotta do is, I'm gonna get rid of this fan anyways. You've gotta have the accessory drive, I believe off an F body is the tightest up against the block. This accessory drive is super long, so that'll shorten it up a little bit. If I did put it in the Submarine, I would have to cut the firewall about 1 inch anyways because my super fat radiator, although you could get away with a different star radiator not cutting the firewall, but I'm already invested in that thing. And then after that, you got an automatic engine, so you gotta get a different flywheel, probably the starter, the clutch, the pressure plate, the throwout bearing, the clutch master cylinder, etc. Different style manifolds hug up against the block, because this right here basically dump right against the frame of the Jeep. Then you gotta get standalone wiring harness, because you're never gonna figure this out. Get the ECU flashed. So that's why an LS swap is super expensive initially. Once you have everything done and bought for it, and you blow an engine, you just swap it out, but it's that initial setting up that makes it ridiculously expensive. So if I dunk the old Submarine and the engine blows because it wasn't really watertight like I thought it was, definitely swapping this in. But if it does prove to be a Submarine and works underwater, I don't know. No. It's gonna go right through the window?